Hello, I'm Paul Carroll, technical writer for Digital Photo Magazine, and welcome to this video tutorial on understanding RAW. The ability to capture images in an uncompressed RAW format has revolutionised digital photography, giving photographers lots of control in the post-production process to fine-tune the white balance, exposure, contrast and saturation of an image, while still maintaining the maximum quality. Converting RAW files can seem a little scary at first, so in this video tutorial I'll be giving you a guided tour of the Camera Raw interface, talking you through each of the controls, tools and adjustment sliders which are on offer, and then in part 2 we'll put this theory into practice and show you how to make a basic RAW conversion. If you're not familiar with the Camera Raw interface, it may seem a little daunting, but it's actually just as easy to use as any other palette in Photoshop. And with a little bit of practice, you'll soon be making stunning RAW conversions. I'm using Adobe Photoshop Elements 6, but if you have a different version of Elements, or the full version of Photoshop, the Camera Raw interface, which is the palette we currently have open on screen, may look slightly different. Don't worry however, the controls are pretty similar, if not identical. To launch the Camera Raw interface, all you need to do is open a RAW image into Photoshop. So if I just cancel this screen, I'll show you how it's done. Open the image cliff_bay.dng from off this month's CD into Photoshop, and that will automatically launch the Adobe Camera Raw interface. Here on the left hand side of the interface, you'll see a preview of your chosen RAW file. And as we adjust the sliders, the preview will change dynamically, allowing you to assess adjustments as you go. It's important to note, however, that as you adjust the sliders, you're not actually changing the RAW file itself, just how the picture information within the file is converted, and ultimately how the image will look once it's opened into Photoshop. Above the image preview, we have the toolbar, and the first two tools are the Zoom tool and the Hand tool, which work in exactly the same way as they do in Photoshop. So with the Zoom tool selected, you can click with your mouse button and zoom into the image preview, and if you hold down the Alt key, you can see that the minus symbol comes up on the magnifying glass, and then by clicking with our mouse button again, we zoom back out. Or by clicking with the magnifying glass and dragging out a marquee selection, we can zoom right into the image, up to a maximum magnification of 400%, which allows you to see each of the individual pixels. When you're zoomed in tightly, if you want to move around the image, then just switch over to the Hand tool, and again using your mouse we can scroll around the image to assess at very close magnification the effect of our adjustments. If you want to know how tightly we're zoomed in, then we can see down in the bottom left hand corner here it says 400%, and if I click on the downward arrow I can then select the Fit in View, which gets me back to the full screen. The next tool, the White Balance tool, allows you to adjust the colour temperature of your image. With the tool selected, simply click on neutral grey tones in the image, and that will automatically set an accurate white balance setting. So you can see by clicking up in the greys of the cloud here, the image has become a lot warmer. The two tools on the right of the White Balance tool are the Crop and the Straighten tool, which pretty much do what they say on the tin, allowing us to crop out unwanted pixels, as well as level up any wonky horizons or correct any vertical lines in an architectural image, for example. We'll be looking at how to use these two cropping tools in more detail in part 2. The crosshair and eye icon is the red eye removal tool, which will help you remove any unwanted red eye if it exists in a portrait. Next to this we have an icon to launch our Camera Raw preferences, which lets you select how RAW files are handled and what default settings should be used. But don't worry about these too much, just leave the options set to their default settings unless you have a good reason to change them. These two icons allow you to rotate your image in either a anti-clockwise direction or a clockwise direction. On the right hand side of the toolbar we have the preview box, and you want to make sure that the preview box is ticked in order that your preview image changes dynamically as you adjust the sliders and settings within the Camera Raw interface. And the final icon on the toolbar allows you to switch between full screen mode or a minimized view. Over in the top right hand corner of the interface, we have the image histogram, which displays graphically how the pixels within the image are distributed across the tonal range, with the darker pixels sitting on the left hand side of the histogram, the mid-tones in the middle, and the lighter pixels on the right hand side. If you're wondering what the different colours on the image histogram represent, it's because pixels from each of the 3 RGB colour channels are mapped separately. This white section of the graph indicates where all 3 colour channels overlap. Where just 2 colour channels overlap, the colour that is formed by mixing those 2 colours is displayed. So for example, where the green and red channels overlap, yellow is displayed. And where colour from just one channel exists, just that colour is displayed. For a very precise view of the RGB colour values contained in each pixel, here underneath the image histogram, the colour numbers are displayed. And you can see that if I hover my mouse over the image preview, these RGB values are constantly changing, indicating the level of colour in each pixel. And this can be useful for checking that we've retained detail in the darkest and brightest parts. So for example, if I hover my zoom tool over the darkest part of the cave there, you can see none of the RGB values have hit 0. We've got a red of 11, green 7, blue 3. So we can be confident that we're still retaining some colour information in this part of the image. Another useful trick for ensuring that we don't lose or clip the darkest or brightest tones in our image are the shadow and highlight clipping warnings, which can be activated using these upward facing arrows in the image histogram. And we'll be looking at how these work in part 2. Then to the right of the RGB values, we have a record of the settings used to capture the shot. So you can see that I captured this image with an aperture of f22 at an ISO sensitivity of 400, using a shutter speed of 1/160th of a second, using an 18 to 70mm lens, zoomed out to 22mm. Along the bottom of the camera raw interface, we have a help button, which gives you access to an online help menu, as long as you're connected to the internet. The Save Image button allows you to save another copy of the raw image in Adobe's generic digital negative format, .dng, and Depth lets you choose between 8 and 16 bits, and this is the bit depth that converted files will be outputted at. The bit depth essentially determines the quality of the image. 8 bits is standard, so leave it set to that unless you need a higher quality image with smoother graduations of colour. But bear in mind 16-bit will significantly increase the file size, taking up more space on your computer hard drive, and Photoshop restricts some of the adjustments possible on 16-bit files. Not only that, but it's also not possible to save 16-bit images in a JPEG format, and unless you have access to 16-bit printing, your prints won't benefit from the higher quality. The Camera Raw plugin, which comes with Photoshop Elements, has its adjustment sliders grouped into 3 tabs: Basic, Detail, and Camera Calibration. If you're using the full version of Photoshop, however, then you'll have some additional tabs here, and we'll be investigating all of these over the course of the Understanding Raw series. But for now, we're just going to be using the sliders under the Basic tab, where we have more controls to adjust the white balance of the image, change the exposure, lighting and contrast of the image, as well as boosting the colour saturation. So join me in part 2, where I'll show you how some relatively minor alterations to these sliders can have a quite dramatic impact on how the converted raw file looks when it's opened into Photoshop.